Today we're going to be working on actually filling out a purchase and sale agreement. So far you probably already watched the videos on filling out the listing agreement and the buyer brokerage agreement. So this kind of follows up on the buyer brokerage agreement since the offer is generally issued by the buyer's agent. So we're going to skip all the initial creating the opportunity because you've already done that. So in order to go in and create your purchase and sale, you're going to go into your opportunity. You're going to go into your documents tab. And then while on the first when we were creating the buyer brokerage or the listing agreement, we had to start a transaction to go to DocuSign. Here we're going to go to transaction. This will take you directly into that DocuSign room where you've already done your buyer brokerage agreement, and this will allow you to now do your purchase and sale forms. So you'll just log into your DocuSign room. And it'll dump you directly into that documents tab. You'll see that you've got your signed buyer brokerage agreement, your affiliated business disclosure still in there, and that actually is going to come into play now. Before we start adding forms, I want to go over to the details page. This is where, now that you have a contract that you want to write, you typically have a property already in mind, and it is typically listed in FMLS. So you want to go ahead and enter in as much information on this first page as you can. And we've got ours over in this other screen. I've just taken a listing in our office at random to do. And this will take you a few minutes to do to fill everything in, but it's worth it on the back end because you don't have to re-enter the information when you start filling in your forms. It will actually auto-populate for you. Okay. So I'm not going to take the time to fill in everything, but this will fill out a large portion of it. The other thing I would recommend going ahead and doing at this point is going back to your listing and clicking on that tax ID button. You're going to need several pieces of information from this form that's going to pop up. You're going to need things like your deed book and page for the legal description, as well as it's a good way to find out the seller name. And the reason you want to actually fill out the seller name is it does take a little bit of time to do, but it's nice for the listing agent on the back end. If you have done this already, if you've entered their information in, it makes it so much easier for them to just send it to their client for signature, and they don't have to worry about getting things signed. The other reason you want to do that is it's actually, you're going to get dinged if on compliance if you do not have this information filled out. And you are relying on the other agent to fill in the information, and it can actually be, they can forget. So you want to make sure you just fill in as much information as possible. We're going to just copy and paste this name. She is with Keller Williams, North Atlanta. And it might seem kind of silly to do all this up front, but it does save you time going forward, because once you add the form in, if this information's already in here, it will pull it over, and it does help you and save you some time. And the information's all here. It's really just copy and paste on a lot of it. Oop. Didn't get the whole thing, but there we go. If there are more than one listing agent, you can put a second listing agent in here. If there's more than one seller, you can also enter in the second seller information as well, right here. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put the offer date as today. And if you wanted to go ahead and put the contract amount, you could. You could. We're going to hold off on that because I want to show you how to do that directly in the form. So we're going to hit save. We put some information in there. The room has been updated. Now we're going to go over to our documents. So we now have one form already in here, and let me show you what it did. Because we entered that information on the details page, you'll see that it actually already filled in the street address on here as well. You've got your buyer's name and the street address. So now it's just going to be exhibit letter and signatures that you need on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go add our forms that we need right now. And the typical forms you need in a purchase and sale are the purchase and sale agreement, whatever financing contingency you need, whether it be a no financing contingency for an all-cash deal, conventional financing, VA financing, FHA financing. And this information you can find out from your buyer and their lender. You're going to need a pre-approval or pre-qualification letter anyway from the lender, so it's a good time to have that conversation with them of what can they afford, what's their price range, what's the max offer, things like that. The other discussion items you need to have with the lender is how much closing costs are they willing to accept from a seller. So if you want to negotiate closing costs, you don't want to negotiate more than they can actually accept. So if they are limited to a $3,000 concession from the seller, you don't want to negotiate a $5,000. You would rather maybe get $2,000 off the sales price and then ask for $3,000 in closing cost. There are other ways to work it out in that way. So you want to find out what they allow for closing costs. You also want to find out what a realistic time frame for an appraisal will be, as well as getting clear to close for the loan. So two things are important when you're looking for a closing date. When does the buyer want to close, and when is the lender able to close? So those are just some things to keep in mind when you start filling in this form. Have those conversations up front so that when they find the house that they want to make an offer on, you have all that information ready to go. So again, we go into our add forms, DocuSign forms, GAR library, and then we just start typing in the forms we want to use. So I'll need a purchase and sale. Make sure you're not picking the commercial purchase and sales. You want the actual F201, which is the GAR purchase and sale agreement. So we're going to select that. And then for this one, I'm going to do a conventional financing. And it's right there. And then the other forms we're going to need are the disclosures. Now, you are not a representative of the seller, so you don't have them. You don't want to create brand new ones, so I'm going to show you where you should be able to find them. If they are not on the listing, then you will just email the listing agent for them. Now, on this listing, the agent actually has them added. You'll see this little documents button right here. If you click on that, it'll pull up the forms that have been loaded by the listing agent that they have actually filled out. So they have a community association disclosure and they have a seller property disclosure statement. This unique features and upgrades is probably just a, hey, these are the extra features in the house. It does not need to be part of the contract. So in this case, I don't want to download all. I just want to download the community association and the seller property disclosure. So they've been downloaded into my folder directly on my hard drive. So you'll see we added the forms we needed to fill out here, the purchase and sale and conventional loan. And now we need to add those disclosures in. So instead of going to DocuSign Forms, we're going to go to Computer. And depending on your computer's temperament, it might take a moment. And you'll see I have them right here at the top. So I just select both of them and click Open. And it will now dump those PDFs. These are not fillable forms. Any edits you need to add an offer date and an exhibit letter to it will need to be done when we create the envelope, and I'll show you how to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is open up our purchase and sale. This is the first form. This is like the cover form of the whole contract package. And like our listing agreement, like our buyer broker agreement, everything has to be filled in on the first page. So you want to put your offer date, and it does allow you to select from either type it in or select from the calendar. You'll see we entered in the information we had earlier, the MLS ID already pulled over. Now the tax parcel ID number, we need to pull back up our listing. This is why it's a good idea to have all these windows already open. The tax parcel ID number is right here, and you will just copy it and paste it into your tax ID. Paste it into your tax ID. Now the next section is your legal description. There are 4 ways to do this. You can do it as an exhibit, where you would go to gsccca.org and pull the actual legal description from a warranty deed or security deed. You can do a condominium exhibit if it is a condo. There's actually a separate exhibit form that you can do for the legal exhibit. And then number 3 is probably your easiest. It's the deed book and page. And then the 4th is actually typing in all of the information that you would find on that legal description from the warranty or security deed. So for our purposes, I always recommend going easy and fast. You want to select number 3, and the way you find that is you go back to that tax record that we had open. I think I closed it. So it's going to open Realist. And you'll actually be able to find this in the last recorded sale. So you want to go down through the information. And you'll see all of this. There's the current listing, and then you'll see this last market sale. You want to find the most recent sale. So the most recent sale was in 2021. And there wasn't actually a sale, it was quit claim. But here is your deed book and your deed page. So 621 is the page number. 10,386 is the deed book. So you just copy and paste. And then you'll notice as we hover over, there are these little pop-ups that come up. These are just indicators from DocuSign that they have mapped the fields. So it's just in case you're really concerned about what should be in that section, that's how you would do it. Now, purchase price. You want to look at what the purchase price, what the sales price is. So what have they listed it for? It's listed at $525. Let's say I talk to my lender and they say, yeah, they can afford $525, but recent market sales in that neighborhood are suggesting that a more realistic price would be $515 or $520. This is where you have that discussion with your buyer as to what they want to offer. Do they want to go in low? Do they want to go in high? How badly do they want the house? Things like that. Is having that discussion with them of what they are willing to pay. So in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and just knock 5,000 off. So I want 520. And you'll notice that I'm not putting a comma in. And that's because DocuSign doesn't like commas and numbers. So be very, very careful to count your zeros. You don't want to change a $520,000 offer into a $5.2 million offer, nor do you want it to come through as $52,000. That will insult the seller, and they probably won't ever look at one of your offers again. So be very careful to count the zeros. It's a glitch in DocuSign that commas do not register, so it will not let you save the number. Seller closing costs. Since I'm asking for $5,000 off the listing price, I'm not going to ask for any, but again, it's a conversation with your buyer. Do they need help with the closing costs? Does the lender allow it? So those are 2 things you need to be aware of. Closing date shall be, today is March 13th or March 12th, so I want to try to close on April 12th. Again, make sure that it is an actual weekday. And then make sure that that date works for both the buyer and the lender. I'm going to say upon closing is when the possession will transfer to the buyer. Or you can do days after closing, This would be where the seller says, hey, we can close on the 12th, but I need an additional couple of days to finally move out, because I'm closing on my other property the same day and I need time to transfer possessions from one house to the next. Totally fine. Just be sure to click that however many days, and then you need to add the temporary occupancy agreement as an exhibit to the contract. Closing firm, you've had this discussion with your buyer up front. Who are you recommending they close with? Do they have a preferred closing attorney? Things like that. We're just going to put one of our partners, O'Kelly and Sorahan, here. If you have a particular branch of that attorney's office that you want to close with, either a particular location, you can add that here as well. So we're going to put the Windward location and then their phone number. I don't have it off the top of my head, so I'm going to leave it blank, but you can always search it by just looking up their website. They usually have their locations. And then you would just find the location that you wanted to use and copy and paste their information. Holder of earnest money. Typically, the buyer's agent, their brokerage holds the earnest money. If for some reason the listing agent is demanding that their broker hold it, while we don't not allow this, be aware that whoever holds the earnest money gets to decide in a situation of a unilateral termination. If one side does not sign the termination, the broker is the one who decides who gets the earnest money. So if there's a dispute over earnest money, the holder is the one who decides. So obviously, you as the buyer's agent want your broker to be the one to make that decision. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to rule in your favor if your buyer is in default, but it just is better practice to have your broker hold the earnest money. Can you have the attorney hold it? Yes. However, you also then have to get the F510 and the F511 form signed to have the attorney agree to hold it and have both parties agree for the attorney to hold it. Again, we recommend just going ahead and having your broker hold it. Number 7 is the earnest money. This is actually the amount of earnest money. This is whatever amount you and your buyer agree. Now, you want it to be significant enough that it commits the buyer to the property. You don't want them to just say, hey, I'll give $1,000 and hey, if I lose it, it's no big deal. You want to show that they're serious about the property. So it is a $500,000 house. You probably want to do $5,000 at least. But it is whatever amount is agreeable to your client. You also have to say how it will be paid by, either by check, ACH, cash, or wire transfer. Check with your broker office to see which forms they take. I know our particular market center in North Atlanta does not accept cash. We accept money orders or cashier's checks, but we do not accept cash. We do check, we do ACH, and we do wire. And this is an or question, so it's not limiting you to that. So if you're not entirely sure how the buyer is going to pay the earnest money to the office, go ahead and check the 3 different options that they have, or the 4 different options. Letter A is you've already got the money, the broker's got the money as of the offer date. This is rare, so not typically used. B is a certain amount of money within a certain number of days of binding agreement. And then C is where you can write in the stipulation of if it's weird and you don't want earnest money to be due until after due diligence is up. That's where you could put that in. Will it be agreed to? That's up for debate, but that's where you would put something like that in. So we're just going to do option B, and I'm going to make it a little more. I'm going to do $6,000 due within 3 days of binding agreement date. Your inspection and due diligence is up next. This is the period of time where the buyer is protected and they can cancel the contract for any reason. This is for any reason. It's the time period where they can do their inspections, but this is the protected period where if they just decide they don't like the house, they can terminate it. After the due diligence is up, then you are limited with the types of ways that they can cancel the contract. It has to be something covered by the financing contingency or a breach of contract by the seller. So you want to give yourself plenty of time to get that inspection done, but you also don't want to give too much time that the seller won't agree to it. So I know my inspector can come out fairly quickly and I can get the inspection report back, so I'm going to go 10 days. Some can do 7, some even do 2 or 3 days. Check with the inspector to make sure they can get it in their schedule and get it done in the time frame so that their buyer is protected. Number 2 is, or down here under B, is the option payment. These are becoming kind of more prevalent, but this is option money paid directly to the seller, not to the broker. It goes directly to the seller, and it's basically the same as the earnest money. You say the amount, how it's going to be paid, when it's going to be available, and whether or not it can be applied to closing costs, and whether or not it's refundable. So you would select what you need. I'm going to put NA, and I'm not just going to leave it blank. You always want to put NA if there is a blank to fill in. I'm not going to offer option money on mine, but if you do have questions about option money when you're making an offer and your buyer wants to offer it or the seller is asking for it, check with your broker or your agent mentors and they'll be happy to help you through that process. Number 9 is very small, but very, very important. This is a federal requirement. So if you don't click this, it's actually a violation of a federal rule, not just a state rule. Was the house built before 1978? If it was built before 1978, you are required by EPA standards to attach a lead-based paint exhibit. If it is not, you don't have to worry about it, but you still have to check that it was not built before 1978. A lot of people get that confused and they go, oh, it was built in 1999. I don't need to even worry about checking that. No, you have to check was or was not. So we're checking was not because this house is the newer one. And then number 10 is the brokerage relationship. This is where you acknowledge that you're representing your buyer as a client and the seller broker is representing their buyer or their seller as a client. In this case, we're representing both sides. So what you would actually do is this number 4, which is acting as a designated agent, where both agents are in the same office. And I am always butchering her name, so I apologize. I'm just going to copy her name. There we go. And then you would put your name where you are representing your client. Material relationship disclosure. This is where if you have any relationship with the buyer whatsoever or the seller has any relationship with the listing agent, this is where this material relationship disclosure would be found. If there is a relationship on the seller side, it's disclosed in the listing. So you would find it there and put it in this section. If you were, buyer is related to the listing or buyer is related to the buyer's agent, you would put buyer is related to the buyer's agent. Or if the buyer is a licensed agent in Georgia but not representing themselves, you would say buyer is a licensed agent in the state of Georgia, or but not representing. If there is no relationship, type none or NA. Do not leave it just blank. Time limit of the offer. This is the expiration date of the offer. You don't just want to leave an open offer out indefinitely and a seller come back a week later and sign the offer and go, hey, we're binding, and they've moved on to another house because they didn't hear from it. So you want to just put a realistic time frame. I would not do noon because it is very, very easy to get noon and midnight confused. So we'll do 11 a.m. on the date of, we'll give them 2 days to talk it over. But not a year. Buyer's initials, seller's initials, you don't have to fill anything out on that. And then we get into the descriptions of everything and the explanations of everything on page 1. So you would just scroll through all of that and then get to page 8 and you will have your number 8, exhibits and addenda. This is where you attach all of your exhibits to the contract and give them letters. Remember, exhibits are letters, amendments are numbers. So I know I'm going to need a conventional loan exhibit. I'm going to do Exhibit A. I know I have a seller property disclosure statement that I have received from the listing agent. That's going to be my B. I'm going to find that nope, not condominium, community association disclosure. That's going to be C. And remember, we've talked about that ABAD needs to be added as well. So now we're going to put other, KWNA ABAD, as Exhibit D. Are there any special stipulations you want to add? Do you want to ask for a home warranty? Do you want to ask for a termite warranty? Do you want to ask for a particular piece of furniture, or that something be left with the property? These are things that you need to have added in the special stipulations. This is a tricky place. You want to make sure it's something that you're legally able to ask for. And then it is also imperative that you get the wording correct. GAR actually has a special stipulations library where they've written them out for you already. They've had attorneys write them out. If it's something not on that list that you want to have written and you're a little concerned with the wording, again, run it by your broker or get with one of our attorney partners and they will be happy to help you with that wording. So we're not going to put anything in there right now, but if you did have additional stipulations you wanted to add, if it didn't fit in this box they give you, again, there's an additional stipulations page, F246, that you can add and add additional information. You'll see we filled out all this information on the initial page, our details page in our room, and it has transferred over. You'll see that the MLS office code does not, unfortunately. Sometimes the mapping gets a little weird in DocuSign, so you want to make sure you fill that in. You also want to make sure you fill it in for the seller as well, or the listing agent. And that's simply a courtesy more than anything. It makes your offer look professional. And if you happen to know the agent's license number, great. Guess what? You can find it out. It's right here next to their name on the listing in FMLS. So you have their phone number, and this is again information that allows you to have them receive notice. So you want to make sure you have as much information in as possible. Are you going to have the the seller's information? Probably not. But it's okay. You've got to have the listing agent's information in there. You might not have their board membership. You might have it. This is not as big a deal as, say, their MLS office code or their brokerage license number. But if you have it, great, enter it. You'll see save and close. And you're done with the purchase and sale. It's not really that hard. It's very self-explanatory as you walk through. Mainly the questions that pop up is how much do I, are they willing to offer? How much closing costs do I offer? When do I do the closing date? All of that is found through a conversation with your buyer and their lender. Sometimes you even need to have that conversation with the listing agent to find out when the seller wants to move, and just to make your offer seem more appealing if it's within their time frame. So now we're going into the conventional loan exhibit. Remember, we labeled this A. You'll see that the offer date pulls in. And then we go into the application. They've applied for first mortgage. We're going to do 80%. All of this can actually be found on the lender letter that you get. If you have any questions on this particular part, this is that conversation with the buyer's lender. And it's an institutional. So you would get this information from the buyer or the lender letter or the lender themselves. This would be where you want to put in use of a particular mortgage lender. They are not required to use this person, but if this is the person that is issuing the approval letter that you want to submit with the offer, I would put them here. Length of the financing contingency period. This is how long um, you have to be safely protected to get the approval for the loan. So if the lender says, I can have it through underwriting, we can have a clear close approval in 18 days, great, put 18 days. Find out what their actual turnaround time is for an approval, because a lot of it is contingent on buyer getting documents in, the appraisal coming through, lots of different factors. So check with them. If they say 21 days, put 21 days. If they say it's going to be 30 days, do 30 days. But this is that conversation where you have and get realistic timelines from each lender that you work with. The length of time a buyer has to request a reduction in sales price based on low appraisal. This is that appraisal contingency. How quickly can the lender get the appraiser out there and get the report back? If it comes in low, how long do you have for the buyer to request a reduction in price and be protected if they decide to terminate if the seller won't reduce the sales price? Because what happens is if the appraisal is low, the seller does not agree to lower the price, and the buyer moves forward, the buyer is going to need to bring additional funds to the table to cover the difference in the appraisal and the loan. So just be aware of that. So realistically, they're going to say 21 days on this for my particular buyer. And then it's just different information that you read over and make sure you discuss with your client before you submit. And again, the signature page, everybody's already put in there. If there were additional signers, more than the 2 on each side, you would have the additional signature page. Save and close. You can put the board membership in. It's not typically something that would be caught by compliance if you did not. Now, we did talk about that we have 2 PDF forms that we're going to be adding to the document. We will talk about that in the next section, where we are actually doing our envelope. But I do want to open my ABAD because we are attaching that as an exhibit to the contract. Now, about the ABAD, it does not need to be signed by the seller. It's just being attached by the buyer to the contract as an acknowledgement. So we said it was going to be Exhibit D, and the offer date is March 12, 2023. And you'll see the buyer's name automatically populated. There's no signature spot for a seller, so it's not signed by the seller. It's just attached to the contract as an exhibit. So now that we've filled out our purchase and sale, and we've filled out our conventional loan, and we've put the exhibit letter on the ABAD, we're going to actually create our envelope and create the offer for signature. So we're going to select everything we need to attach. So it's the conventional loan, community association, your purchase and sale, and your ABAD, as well as the seller disclosure. And we're going to hit create envelope. And for this, we're just sending it to the buyer's agent and the buyer agent and the buyer one. And remember, by selecting those over here, it auto-populates the signature fields for you. Okay, now you'll notice it dumped all your forms in. Again, if you click on them, they're going to be blank. They're just giving you examples. But this actually shows you the order that they will be in. So if you want to, most people do, go ahead and put it in order of the exhibits. So you have purchase and sale. We had Exhibit A as conventional. I had the seller disclosure as Exhibit B. I had the community association as Exhibit C, and the ABAD as Exhibit D. We're not going to set a signing order because I want it to go to everybody at once. Again, we have the message that you can do, and it usually picks the first form that was added. So we're going to do offer to purchase just so that the buyer can see what's coming through. If there's any particular message, hey, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to walk you through it, that kind of thing. And we're going to click next. And depending on how many file sizes, how many files you have, it can take a few moments for it to add, but you'll notice everything pulled over. As you're scrolling through, just double check everything. You'll see the buyer's initial has been added. You'll see that your exhibit letters are in here. We did not have any special stipulations. There's the buyer's signature and date, you as the agent's signature and date, and then it scrolls right into Exhibit A. Again, signatures have been added. Then you get into the seller property disclosure and you're going to go, wait, we don't have an exhibit letter and we don't have an offer date. This is where you make sure that your name is selected over here as the agent, and you can actually add these fields in. So we're going to add a text box, and this is Exhibit B. We're going to add a date field, or you can do text if you know the buyer's wanting to actually signing it one day, but the offer date's another day. This is where you want to make sure you put the correct offer date. Make sure it matches that page 1 of the purchase and sale. And then you'll notice when you get down to the signature page that it did not auto-populate. That's because this was a flat PDF. It wasn't an editable form, so DocuSign isn't able to map it for signatures. So it's very easy to add those. You just select the buyer name and drag their signature spots over. You want their date signed, and it even saves you the time. You just pick their full name, their signature, and the date signed, and that will fill it in. The same happens with this community association. Any forms that are PDFs that are added, you do need to make sure you add the exhibit letters and the offer dates. And it is just drag and drop and edit. And you'll see that that information is in. And you'll also notice on this one that did not auto-populate a place for this buyer to sign. So again, you just switch over to the buyer's name, add their signatures, the date signed, and their name. You'll see your Exhibit D came over. Everything has been filled in. Their signature spots have been filled in, and you are good to go. All you have to do is hit send, and that will send it to your buyer for signature. Once it has been signed by all parties, this time, which would be yourself and the buyers, you can PDF the whole form and email it over to the listing agent, and that's how you would submit your offer. If you have any questions or get stuck anywhere in the process, always reach out to your office staff as well as your agent mentors and your broker, and they will be happy to help you.